Hello, history learners. I'm here to share fascinating stories from history in an audio format, perfect for listening while doing chores, studying, or just relaxing with something interesting in the background. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider subscribing for more history content like this. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode and uncover one of ancient Rome's strangest historical facts, the surprising story of why the Roman Empire once placed a tax on urine and what it reveals about the ingenuity and practicality of Roman society. Today, I invite you to journey back nearly 2,000 years into the bustling streets, crowded marketplaces, and towering marble forums of Roman Empire, a civilization remembered for its military might, engineering brilliance, political innovation, and legal systems that helped shape the modern world. Yet among its grand achievements lies one of history's strangest and most fascinating facts. In ancient Rome, there was indeed a tax on urine. At first hearing, this sounds absurd. It sounds like the setup to a joke rather than a legitimate economic policy of one of the most powerful empires in human history. But as strange as it may seem, the urine tax reveals something profoundly important about Roman society: their practicality, their economic ingenuity, and their ability to transform even waste into wealth. To understand why the Romans taxed urine, we must first understand the world they lived in. Ancient Rome was not merely a city. It was the center of a vast empire stretching from Britain to North Africa and from Spain to the Middle East. Millions of people lived under Roman rule. Urban life was dense and crowded. Public baths, laundries, workshops, markets, and apartment blocks filled Roman cities. Managing daily life required systems for water, sanitation, commerce, and taxation. The Romans were masters of infrastructure. They built aqueducts to carry water across enormous distances. They engineered roads that still influence modern routes today. They developed sewer systems, public fountains, and bathhouses that astonished later civilizations. But despite all their sophistication, they still faced a universal human reality: people produce waste. And the Romans, being remarkably practical people, discovered that human urine was not useless at all. In fact, urine had significant commercial value.
Why?
Because urine contains ammonia. In the ancient world, ammonia was extremely useful. Roman fullers, workers who cleaned and processed cloth, relied on urine to wash garments and whiten togas. Tanners used it in leather production. It was even employed in certain industrial and chemical processes. In other words, what most people considered disgusting waste was, to Roman businesses, a valuable raw material. Yes, an entire economic chain existed around human urine. And where commerce existed, taxation soon followed. The emperor most famously associated with this unusual policy was Vespasian, who ruled from 69 to 79 CE. Vespasian came to power during a difficult period for Rome. Civil war had shaken the empire. Government finances were strained. Massive rebuilding projects required money. The treasury needed revenue. So Vespasian looked for taxable industries. And he found one in the urine trade. Collectors and merchants dealing in urine were required to pay taxes for the privilege of gathering and selling it. To modern ears, this may sound ridiculous, but from the Roman perspective, it made perfect sense. If a product generated profit, the state believed it should contribute revenue. According to Roman historians, Vespasian's son, Titus, criticized the tax for being distasteful and embarrassing. In response, Vespasian reportedly held up a coin derived from the tax revenue and asked whether it smelled bad. When Titus said no, Vespasian replied with the famous phrase,
Pecunia non olet.
"Money does not stink." That phrase has survived for nearly 2 millennia. Even today, it symbolizes the idea that money's source often matters less to governments and institutions than its usefulness. Think about the deeper meaning of this story. The urine tax was not simply about bodily waste. It reflected the Roman worldview: intensely practical, unsentimental, and economically efficient. The Romans saw value where others saw filth. They understood that resources could be extracted from unexpected places. In many ways, this ancient policy foreshadowed modern recycling economies and industrial reuse systems. Today, societies recycle plastics, convert waste into energy, purify wastewater, and transform discarded materials into commercial products. The Romans, in their own strange way, were already practicing a primitive form of resource recovery. The urine tax also reminds us that taxation itself has always evolved alongside society. Throughout history, governments have taxed windows, salt, tea, beards, candles, paper, and even playing cards. Whenever states needed revenue, they looked carefully at human behavior and commerce. Rome simply took that logic to a memorable extreme. But beyond economics, this story humanizes the ancient Romans. Too often we imagine ancient civilizations as distant, marble-covered worlds populated only by emperors, gladiators, and philosophers. Yet the urine tax reminds us that Rome was also a living, messy, practical society filled with workers, merchants, cleaners, bureaucrats, and ordinary citizens dealing with everyday realities. It reminds us that history is not only about wars and kings. It is also about laundry. It is about sanitation. It is about commerce. It is about the surprising ways humans adapt to the needs of society. And perhaps most importantly, this strange historical fact demonstrates the timeless ingenuity of human civilization. Across every era, people have searched for ways to solve problems, generate resources, and sustain complex societies. Sometimes those solutions are elegant. Sometimes they are bizarre. And occasionally they're both. So the next time you hear someone dismiss history as dull or irrelevant, remember ancient Rome's urine tax. Remember that one of the greatest empires in history funded part of its treasury through the collection of human waste. Remember that an emperor turned embarrassment into economic policy and gave the world a phrase still quoted today: "Money does not stink." In that one sentence lies a lesson about economics, politics, human nature, and the enduring pragmatism of civilization itself. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this journey into history. Be sure to come back tomorrow for another fascinating story from the past. And if there's a historical topic you'd like to hear about, feel free to leave a suggestion in the comments. Your ideas might inspire a future episode.